This episode is for business leaders who want to create an exceptional culture, team, and profits. Have you ever struggled to attract, find, and foster or retain talented employees? If so, it's your fault at worst. And regardless, it's your responsibility, no matter whose fault it is. So this is a book review of No Rules Rules, the Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention by Reed Hastings, current CEO and co-founder of Netflix, and Aaron Meyer, a culture expert and author of the book The Culture Code. So essentially what I'll do is I'll summarize the main themes of the book and talk about some of the academic and business research that supports what the authors learned from their ongoing operation of Netflix and from the academic research itself. So stay to the end for bonus material on how you can start to apply some of these principles immediately in your company at no financial cost whatsoever, and a recommended video on attracting exceptional talent. So we've probably all seen highly consistent failures that occur in almost daily inside many companies whose culture accepts such things, not only accept, but even worse, actually encourage coasting, politics, and talent loss because of dogmatic, rigid corporate rules and bureaucracy. So Netflix is kind of the antithesis of this. Everybody's given a tremendous amount of responsibility. So it's funny because I use the same principles in my classroom, whether I'm teaching toddlers or technology geniuses like the head of R&D who actually invented the crumple channel in your car door, or at least in the car door of most cars all over the world, but it was invented by a Japanese R&D researcher whom I've taught. So the overall theme of this is very simple. The overall theme from the book, as I take it, is that treat people like exceptionally capable, responsible adults, and they will tend to act like exceptionally capable, responsible adults. That doesn't mean there's no guidelines, but the guidelines is just, sort of, use your brain, do stuff that is in the, essentially, here's what the essence of the principle that they talk about. It says their guiding principle tends to be when it comes to expenses and it comes to decisions, you don't need senior approval for anything whatsoever, but you have to do what is in the best interest of Netflix to the best of your ability and judgment. And there is absolutely no need to get that approval if you've done that. Another one that they do, which I really loved, it was celebrate success and sunshine mistakes. That is, shine full bright light on mistakes. The reason is so that everybody can learn from and avoid the same mistakes going forward. That is, mistakes, especially by the senior management, are highlighted very publicly and discussed very publicly. Not hidden, not swept under the rug. They are shown as a learning opportunity they truly are. So here's the responsibility part, though. If you show consistently poor judgment, you will be let go with a generous severance, which usually consists of 4 to 9 months of wages, which is pretty exceptionally high. But it's sort of like, be great at what you do. You won't get in trouble for making mistakes. But to consistently show poor judgment, you will eventually be shown the door with a generous severance. So another one that I really loved, and this makes one way to really retain talent that most companies wouldn't do because they're too busy spending money on control and monitoring and bureaucracy when they could be spending it on their people, and minimizing this with this unique approach, which is pay employees at their personal top of market rate, and proactively keep that up to date. In general, he talked about not really lowering it, but if the current market rate didn't go up, they're unlikely to get a raise. They'll either get a minimal raise or no raise at all because they're already at top of market, and the market maximum rate or highest rate hasn't changed. Now, what this actually is they look at the top of market rate and then they add a small amount to that. So it's literally you're at the very top of what everybody else would offer you for the job you're doing, plus a little bit more, so that, you know, if you find another rate, in fact, you're encouraged to speak to recruiters. If they call, go find out what they're offering. If you can show credible evidence that that's what they offered, great. We'll up your wage to that. That's essentially what it is. It's pretty brilliant. The other thing I love here, though, is free riders, assholes, or anyone who isn't continuously striving for excellence is probably going to also be let go. This is the whole thing. By having this responsibility, you can't do any of the things that most people do to just stay in their jobs and just get by. There's none of this working to a level to not get fired. If you're not working at the best level you're capable of, and that level is acceptable and consistently where it needs to be, as is basically standardized against your coworkers, then you will not be working there. So the other one, and this is one of my favorite that I've seen in no companies ever, but I've always believed in, and I do this in my own classroom, and that is to give exceptionally candid feedback with the intent to help the recipient improve. This isn't just an opportunity to tell them they suck at something. It's an opportunity to say, here's what I see, and here's what I think could improve that. So it's a matter of feedback for the betterment of your coworkers. So in Netflix, they talked about giving this kind of really candid feedback anytime, anywhere. And though that's really valuable, especially given the fact that everybody wants to find the right time, there's no right time to give feedback that people may not want to hear, but it's really important in the delivery. So it's like this. They say anytime, anywhere, but I disagree. There's a better option, and that is to give the feedback immediately whenever possible. And this is based on neuroscience and psychology and classical or operant conditioning, and is very consistently shown in the research, which I'll get to in a second. So the principles at Netflix basically channel much of the research and wisdom from Ray Dalio's principles. The idea, in fact, of one of Ray Dalio's principles is if you have credible knowledge, that you should be disagreeing with the top guy, no matter how high he is above your own station, your own rank, your own status. If you do not bring up that objection, if you do not push back against what you know to be a bad decision with credible evidence and knowledge, you can be fired for not speaking up. So they do something very similar in Netflix, but I don't think it came from Ray Dalio as such, but it's very similar to that principle. Also, though, it goes further than that because it taps into, probably unintentionally, but it's supported by some of Robert Cialdini's work when he talks about disclosing something vulnerable about yourself, a mistake at the beginning of a conversation or at the beginning of a presentation will cause everybody to like you and trust you more for the rest of that interaction. Also, very similar things were said by Brené Brown in her book, Daring Greatly. So that kind of vulnerability is really good. Now, here's a caveat to that, though, is that you have to have already demonstrated competence before you do this. If you do, it will build trust and rapport and respect from your colleagues that you were able to express something vulnerable or talk about a mistake you made. But if you haven't yet established that credibility in what you do, that you're competent and good at your job, it will have the opposite effect. So if you come in on your first day and you decide to disclose some stupid thing you did or some silly thing you did at a previous job, that's probably going to lower their trust, their liking, and your credibility. And you'll have to fight against that for a good long time. You now have to prove your competence, rather than proving your competence up front and then making these kind of vulnerable disclosures after the fact. So it also goes into some of Jim Collins' stuff, in particular, one of his ideas that I loved from the book Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0, which was what they call Oprahs, which is one person ultimately responsible. Now, they don't have the explicit thing, but essentially anybody at Netflix is pretty much able to make any damn decision they want, regardless of cost, as long as they have done their homework and they are responsible not only for the outcome, good or bad, but also their decision. So since they're given so much power and leeway and responsibility, they tend to rise to the occasion. Again, they're being treated as responsible, capable adults with incredible abilities. So they stand and deliver on that. And if they are unable to do that after multiple times, then they would be let go with that nice severance package. So this is the thing too for Jim Collins. It's also he talks about things like this in Good to Great, sort of minimizing. It's been so long since I've listened to the book, but essentially many of the principles that are talked about in this book are also in Jim Collins's books. I would actually say, heck, just about every one of Jim Collins's books channels much of the same philosophy. Decades before Reed Hastings and Netflix practice or develop these same things from the business side of it, rather than from the research and academic side tested against real world business cases. So also, in addition to this, I'm mentioning a lot of my favorite authors, Adam Grant's Give and Take and Daniel Pink's Drive. That is, when you are given mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And the key word there would be autonomy, to do what you want, to do what you do to the best of your ability and judgment. You tend to do it really well and stay highly motivated. And this is an integral part of how they do it at Netflix. And the last two, that is Adam Grant and Daniel Pink, very often and generously share tidbits in their social media releases, at least on LinkedIn, where I see them a lot. So good stuff, and stuff that shows up in this book in various forms or related to it, that shows the research aligns with what they're doing in this book that I am reviewing right now. So in other words, No Rules basically summarizes and proves many of the things that Hastings learned as he ran Pure, a company he was, I believe, the CEO of before he founded Netflix, but also as they built Netflix, and the decades of scientific research and business research that has happened in other places that validate the same kind of things. So most leaders actually hesitate to apply these kind of insights, like pay your people as much as the top offers in the market, plus a little bit. Give them the authority to spend millions of dollars without having to check with you. Sure, absolutely. It's very interesting. We're going to get into this in a second. But it's interesting because by leaders hesitating to do this, their insights, what they lose by being hesitant, by basically showing all their employees that they think they're basically stupid children rather than responsible, capable adults, you get that coasting, that politicking and other things which just don't exist, or exist so minimally at Netflix, because you get your candid feedback and all that other stuff. And if you continue to do things that you shouldn't, you've already been given the feedback, you just get your ass kicked out. Simple as that. So the price most companies and most company cultures pay is they pay in lost talent, politics, and people shirking responsibilities. Oh, it's not my fault. It would be if you're the only one who had were given permission to make that decision and made it all on your own. And you should obviously do your due diligence. That is part of that responsibility too. So that's it. That's why most companies have crappy work culture. Also, some of the stuff I've discussed in previous videos about what I would call default culture, which is always garbage because it winds up being sort of rules of the jungle. And congratulations and welcome to the bonus content. One of the most powerful things you can do to radically improve your culture and workplace skills is to use that radical benevolent feedback. I do this in classes with high-level executives. I do the very same thing leveled by age with toddlers, no kidding. And the thing is here is the benevolent part. You're telling them something they're doing wrong, but more accurately, you're telling them how to do something they're doing better and encouraging them to strive for it. Now, you want to do this immediately whenever you can, because it's just the same as riding a bike. So the caveat is you got to do this in a psychologically safe environment. I have literally corrected or encouraged, some people would say pushed, 2-year-olds to speak better. And they're not even native speakers, they're Japanese speakers. And you know what? They do it, because it's not like, do this better. It's like, I'm here. And they do it. They do it because they know they can, and they know they're safe if all they do is try their best. Now, in this case, in the case of Netflix, well, if you try your best and it's not good enough, you will eventually be asked to leave. So by doing it immediately in a psychologically safe environment, and you express your feedback or opinions in such a way that it's actionable, that is, when you give that feedback, you just don't say, you're rude to people. You say, if you be friendlier with people and measure your words more carefully, so it will give you a better outcome, because we've noticed that sometimes people get upset by the way you come across, right? Something that they can actually act on, but as you can tell by the tone, it isn't like you're an idiot or you're a jerk. Even if that's the way you're coming across, you can still you can frame it benevolently. And ideally, you need to add to that, if you can, that it's supported by objective evidence. It doesn't have to be numerical evidence. It doesn't have to be metrics in the traditional sense. It could be people in the office have sometimes felt as though you spoke or gave feedback in an aggressive manner. That's an objective or empirical fact that multiple people in the office did that. That's something objective to sort of support your position. So then the next thing is that the reason that you want to do immediate feedback is it's just universal. That is, immediate feedback produces maximal learning because of the association between the behavior and the results of that behavior. If those are far apart, if you try to train your dog to do something and it does the trick you want, or it lays down like you want, but you reward it 10 minutes later, it won't learn, because there's the time between the reward or the reinforcement or the feedback of any kind, positive or negative, and the behavior is so far apart that they won't be associated. That's true with humans too. Seconds is better than minutes. Fractions of seconds is better than seconds. So that's just the way we naturally learn. So think of this like riding your bike. If you're not exactly balanced, I'm on a yoga ball right now. So if I do this, I'm not touching the ground. I have immediate feedback and I'm forced to adjust. But I know if I'm doing it correctly, because if I'm not correct, I fall immediately. That's the kind of immediate feedback we use on our bike, or the immediate feedback when you swing your golf club and you slice it. Well, you have immediate feedback. It isn't like you hit the ball and an hour later you realize that you made a bad shot. That's the way our brain works. Immediate feedback is always best. And if it's in the context of psychological safety, which is, of course, actually the ability to say anything to anyone without them having to fear being punished or any kind of reprisal or being fired for making a mistake. It's not about avoiding conflict or making people feel happy. It's about giving them that honest feedback without them feeling harshly criticized. But even that, even if they do feel criticized, it's not even that. It's knowing that there is no repercussions to tell your boss, you did this and it's wrong, and here's why, followed by specific actionable feedback and evidence. You can do that. Now, again, as I said earlier, in Netflix, and I have to agree with this, it's always going to be true that you can't consistently and repeatedly do your job poorly and express poor judgment and expect to stay at Netflix. Nor should you, as a leader, support anybody to stay at your company if given continuous, honest, frank feedback in a psychologically safe environment, eventually they're either improving and up to standard and can stay, or they're not, and that's when you offer them a generous severance package. So it really comes down to this in terms of the way they do it. And that is, when you disagree with somebody or when you're giving feedback that's hard to give, do it in a way that is not disagreeable. You can disagree entirely with your boss. You can say, boss, I completely disagree with everything you say. You're wrong, and here's why. And you can do it in such a way with a calm voice, not you're wrong, you're an idiot, but you're wrong. Here's the actionable stuff you could do, and here's the reason I think it's true. It could just be an opinion, but it should be a well-informed opinion. After all, it's what you're an expert in, probably because that's why you're making the comment. Then the last thing was, and this is repeating it though, is that you try to support your position with in a way that's actionable and with some kind of empirical evidence, even if it's the people in the office have found that X is a problem consistently with you. And because you're getting immediate feedback, you really do have the opportunity to improve in real time rather than a once a year performance review, which is a joke for so many reasons in terms of the psychology, the memory, the learning, and all that kind of stuff. So we're already to the end. Thank you for watching. My recommended video for today is how to attract exceptional talent. I'll put the link there and in the description. And finally, download my Attract Exceptional Talent checklist to learn to do what the title says. I will put that at the top of the description. It will be the first thing you'll see. This has been Crush It Club 296, the very last one of the year. Happy New Year. No rules, rules. Book review. That's it. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.